Good evening. I'm going to argue the exact opposite of Nick, that the growth of public relations is not threatening the integrity of the press, and I'm going to argue it for two reasons. One is because in order to threaten something, it has to exist in the first place, and I rather doubt that the integrity of the press ever existed. And if I may, since he mentioned Lord Beaverbrook, if I may just give you one of his most famous quotes, "I run the paper for the purpose of making propaganda and with no other motive," Lord Beaverbrook said. And he didn't say that last week, he said it about 30 years ago. So whatever it is that our industry has done in growing over the last 20 years, which has been significant in terms of growth, has got nothing to do with the origins of where the press came from in the first place. The second reason I'm going to argue it is that actually I think the growth of the public relations industry has achieved exactly the opposite. It's made the press more honest rather than less honest. Now, given that I just used the word honest, and that isn't actually what integrity means, I thought I'd begin by just actually looking up what integrity means. I know this is a boring way to start an address, but I'll do it anyway because I bet the rest of you haven't. Integrity actually is defined as moral uprightness, which is always fascinating because I've often wondered why there isn't anything called moral upleftness, mainly because I sit on the right, though he's made me sit on the left tonight to make me uncomfortable. It also means wholeness or soundness, and you can interpret those words in whatever way you want to. But the whole problem for the press is that it is inevitably limited on how much information it can get. Those of you who've thought about these things will know that the truth is a moving object. The truth that is true at 5:25 is not the same truth that is necessarily that is true at 6:30. One of the reasons the media has developed 24-hour news service is precisely to deal with that issue. And if you're a rather sad person like me and you watch television all the time, non-stop, and you watch nothing but news programs and never watch a program ever, because you only like the news, you will know how stories develop as they run along. The press, of course, prints at certain times. Thanks to modern technology, mainly brought about through the works of Rupert Murdoch, the most reviled man in the world, the technology now is such in newspapers that they can actually reprint their newspapers all the time. Unfortunately, the facts of the matter about a story change. The number of people who are dead changes, the number of people who aren't dead changes, who they think is guilty or not guilty changes, and so on. And the thing that I think is fundamentally the case is that, and I agree with Nick entirely about this, is that the reason that the journalists have become less efficient, less good at what they do, rather than having less integrity, because I just don't think it ever had any in the first place, is because they have to do more work. He's quite right. There are 3 times more materials being produced by the same number of journalists that there were 20 years ago. And so they have to work much harder. They have to produce more copy. And they do depend much more on our industry because we actually have the time and the money and the resources and the motivation to study the subjects that we talk about, study the businesses that we represent, study the people that we represent, actually try and find out the facts about it, absolutely with the intention of concealing those facts that we don't like and putting out those facts that we do like. I make no secret about it, nor do we ever pretend that we do anything else. We openly admit our bias. When I speak to a journalist, the first thing I do is tell him whom I'm representing. And more often than not, I'll tell him what argument I want to put across. Don't tell me that the average journalist is honest about his opinions about things, because he's not. Nowadays, news and opinion gets completely merged together. And actually, one of the most unedifying sights is the constant conversation between one journalist and another journalist, which seems to be a substitute for news reporting on television now. And a lot of those journalists are newspaper journalists and not television journalists. My American friends are fascinated by the way British television constantly analyses the press, what the papers say. Let's discuss what's in the newspapers this morning. In America, you wouldn't mention the press because they're a competitor. And the last thing you want to do is encourage people to go out and buy newspapers. You want them to watch your television station. Competition is absolutely at the root of these problems. I want to just make 5 points about why I think the public relations industry is not responsible, if there is, a reduction in the integrity of the press. First of all, and I'm not talking about the little errors, which are great fun and actually well worthwhile. I had to dig some of these up because I love them. This is an apology from the Daily Telegraph on the 23rd of February 2007, which says, in Friday's article on Liz Hurley's wedding, it was wrongly stated that the actress is holding a pheasant shoot on the Sunday after the ceremony. Game shooting is, of course, illegal on Sundays, and the pheasant season ended on February the 1st. We apologise for the error and accept that if any shooting is to be done, it will be done by the paparazzi who have no season and do not observe the Sabbath. And the second one, which I absolutely adore, is from the Daily Mirror. I'm sorry, with apologies to Roy, it wasn't during your term. On the Daily Mirror, in the Daily Mirror on July the 13th, 2007, which said, "Big Brother's Carol is a sexual health worker, not a sex worker," which usually means something rather different. Nor am I talking about the wonderful thing that Henry Porter once did, actually. He wrote a piece in which he deliberately made 5 grammatical errors in May 1986. And he revealed he had deliberately done this, and if anybody could send in pointing out the 5 grammatical errors, he would give them a bottle of champagne. The letters poured in. And the following week, Porter announced that no reader had found any of his 5 mistakes. However, they had located 23 other mistakes which he'd made, which he wasn't aware of. And I'm not talking about those kind of things, which are perfectly natural. I'm talking about the great untruths, issues like the Hitler's diaries in the Sunday Times, and inevitably Abu Ghraib and the photographs that appeared in the Daily Mirror under Piers Morgan's regime. Don't tell me they were done by public relations companies, because they weren't. And there is a very important difference here between the people Nick is attacking and the people I represent. I work in the public relations industry. I'm not a press officer. I'm not a press officer in government. I'm not a press officer at the Metropolitan Police. They are not public relations people. They are press officers. They are liaisons with journalists. We don't do that. What we do is very simple, which is to give information as persuasively as possible. The definition of public relations, which virtually nobody understands, is the use of third-party endorsement to inform and persuade. It makes no secret about what it does. Who is the third party? The third party is the journalist. Who are we trying to inform? The people the journalists talk to. Why are we trying to do it? Because we're trying to persuade people of the point of view that our client has paid us to try and persuade people of. We don't apologise for it. We don't call it propaganda. We don't think it's some kind of evil thing that we shouldn't be doing. We're completely open and transparent about it. We don't send out anonymous press releases. We don't get anonymous faxes on our fax machines in our press offices, in our newspaper offices, and then run them on the front page of the newspaper. We don't hire Benjamin the bagman to go out and steal the rubbish from my office, go through it all, file it, and send it to Mark Hollingsworth, and so that he can write abusive pieces about Mark Thatcher and others, including me. We don't do any of those things. We completely transparently publish press releases under our brand name. We send them out. We put them in the post. We put them on the fax. We put them on the email. We make no secret about what we've done. We don't actually tell people that we're representing somebody who we're not. We always admit exactly who we're representing. And we don't behave like journalists who ring you up and say, don't tell you who they're representing. One of the things that is most extraordinary is freelancers, because freelancers what they do is they ring up and say, I'm with the Daily Mail. You ring up the Daily Mail and ask for the journalist by name, and they say, we haven't got him. And then you find he's a freelancer. So he's not actually working for the Daily Mail. What he's doing is creating a story which he's then going to sell to the Daily Mail, and you're going to get screwed in the process. And we don't do any of those things. So I would argue that we act with considerable integrity. Main reason being is that we are whole and sound in what we do. I'm not going to get into a debate on moral uprightness, because morality is in the eyes of the beholder. But the third thing that we don't have a problem with is resources. We have plenty of resources. We tell our clients how much it's going to cost to do these jobs, and we don't do it if they don't give us sufficient money to do the job. Newspapers are trying to produce, or publishing houses are trying to produce more and more product to go to more and more people in order to get more and more advertising revenue, mainly more and more classified revenue, and they're putting it online in order to pick up all the internet advertising as well. And instead of the journalists getting decent resources to do their job properly, they get starved of resources and do their job badly and blame it on us. So I think when it comes down to threatening integrity, the threat to integrity is not from the public relations industry, it's from the owners of the media. And frankly, if the people who work in the media can't persuade their employers to put proper investment into their newspapers, then that's their problem, not mine.
Right.